This is a training video for the volume normalization functionality found in Audio Switch. There are two different components of this normalization. Obviously, we've got the main button here at the top of the user interface, and at the bottom we have this little tick box called Calculate File Loudness Data. And by the way, let's back up a half a step and talk about this. Normalization simply means that if you have some files that are very loud, relatively speaking to other files, this process will allow you to make all files approximately the same loudness. So that's what normalization means here. And this button at the top along with this little checkbox at the bottom work together, because when you select this checkbox at the bottom, it will populate these values up here, and you can see what the volume of a particular track is, whether or not it's clipping, and then track gain and the clip track as well, and we'll talk about all of these here in just a second. And then once you know what the volume is of all these different tracks, you may look at them and say, well, you know, one's very high, one's very low, I'd like to normalize them, and that's when this process over here comes in. So let's go ahead and tick this box and talk about a couple of things that happen. First of all, it's going to throw up this little warning because indeed when you ask it to calculate volume loudness, it does take several seconds per file. In this case, I have 110, 112 files open, so it's going to take us 4, 5, 6 minutes. So let's go ahead and start it. And as it does it, you can see that it populates these things up here. The other thing that I want to point out to you is that, again, it grays it out because it's in process, so it will not allow you to do anything else. And if you decide for whatever reason that you want to cancel that process, this calculation of the loudness data, then you simply hit the cancel button. I'm going to let this go for a few more seconds, and then I am going to cancel it so we can talk about some additional things. Okay, so let's go ahead and cancel out of this. As you can see, as it calculates this loudness data, it populates the volume, and so you can see the volume of each of these different tracks: 93, 92, 94, and change, etc., etc. You can also see whether or not a track is clipping. Most of these are no's, but there are some yeses, and we will also talk about that in a separate video. But briefly, let me just say that just because it says yes doesn't necessarily mean that you can hear the clipping. And again, we do have a separate training video about that, so you might want to watch that training video. Once we have calculated the loudness volume for each of these files, and let's say we decide that we want to normalize these, what we do then is we go up here to the normalization button and we select it, and when we do that, it opens this relatively small Windows dialog, and there are a couple of things that happen here. First of all, you can see that the target normalization volume is set to 89 decibels, and it's set by default, so every time you open and use this particular dialog, it's going to have it set at 89. You're free to override that anytime you want, and indeed you may need or want to do that, but I just want to point out a couple of things. First of all, this track gain is based upon the difference between this volume that's calculated on a file less this 89, or this default value. So if we change this, and again, you can change this at your will, call this 100, now you can see that the track gain has changed because it was 93, now we're going to move it to 100, so we're going to increase the gain by 6.5 decibels. Now, one of the other things that you can begin to see, I think, is over here in this fourth column, talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, this fourth column of data that we generate when we select this Calculate File Loudness Data checkbox down here, is the clip track. And what we simply mean by that is that whether or not this track is going to clip after the volume normalization is applied. And what this is telling us is that before it was not clipping, now it's going to clip. Before it wasn't clipping, now it's going to clip. So probably what this means is that if you decide to normalize a group of files, you may need to experiment with this number until you find a value that you are happy with, meaning that it changes the volume or normalizes the volume for all of them while minimizing or completely eliminating the number of tracks that clip, as indicated in this fourth column over here. So 95, we still have some clipping. Let's go down to 90. Now we have all of them saying no here. So that may be sufficient, and as you can see at 90, we're going to decrease the volume of, looks like everything in this particular case, by some amount. So once you've decided upon a target volume normalization value, in this case 90, what you would do next is you would simply tick this button here, or tick this box that says Apply Volume Normalization, and then you would click OK, and you're going to get this little warning that pops up. And then once you click the Convert button either here or here, and it converts these files to whatever file format you're asking it to convert it to, it will also apply the volume normalization, meaning the gain. So it will either be negative or positive gain here depending upon what you've selected. Let's go back to the normalization button again and just look at one other thing, and that is that this checkbox must be checked in order for the volume normalization to run. However, if you click Cancel, even after you've selected this, it's going to unselect that. If you click the X button, it's going to deselect or unselect that. So the steps or the process has to be that you select this, then you click OK, and that confirms, it tells the program that you do want to run volume normalization. The other thing that I'd like to mention to you as well is that every time you load a new group of files, you're going to go through this normalization process, assuming that you wanted to normalize. You can't have this set by default. And the reason for that is just simply because volume normalization is not something that's reversible, and we want to make certain that you want to apply it every time. If this was checked by default and you forgot about it, you could open a batch of files and it might apply volume normalization and you didn't intend it to. So this is going to force you to go through this step on every group of files that you load, and that's the reason why we're doing it in the workflow that we're doing it. So with that, we're going to conclude this training video on volume normalization. Thanks for watching.